Good morning, my dear audience, and warmest welcome to Impact Webinar, Bolstering a Pipeline-Based Hydrogen Future for Europe. My name is Sara, and I'm a Senior Content Analyst from Leader Associates. It's my great honor and privilege to be your host for today's webinar. This webinar is also a virtual session of Europe's largest and most influential green hydrogen event, Connecting Green Hydrogen Europe 2023, which will take place on July 5th and July 6th in Madrid, Spain. In addition to your participation in today's webinar, we also look forward to meeting you in person at this flagship hydrogen event, which brings together the highest level decision makers across the entire value chains to discuss the latest innovations and fill your business future by meaningful connection. Please don't hesitate to secure your tickets and join this must-to-attend event. Together with C-level decision makers from Galp, E.ON, Repsol, EDPR, Enagás, Shell, Engine, BP, Intercontinental Energy, and much more to impact. As Europe seeks to transition to a low-carbon future, hydrogen is increasingly being recognized as key elements in the energy mix. However, robust infrastructure is essential to make this transition a reality, and pipelines are a crucial part of this infrastructure here. Today, we'll be exploring the potential of a pipeline-based hydrogen future for Europe and how it will be achieved in the future. Our invited established thought leaders from Europe's leading TSOs, DSOs, and industry associations, including Gasgrid Finland, Eurogas, Ontras, REN, European Hydrogen Backbone, IRENA, S.p.A, Open Grid Europe, Gas Infrastructure Europe, and they will discuss the current status of a hydrogen pipeline and the challenges facing the development of a more interconnected hydrogen pipeline network, as well as the potential benefits of a pipeline-based system for Europe as a whole. We will also examine successful cases of leading hydrogen corridors and make a deep dive into technologies and partnership that has made this project possible. Whether you are a policymaker, a business leader, or an individual interested in the future of sustainable energy of Europe, this webinar is just tailored for you. I hope you are excited as I am to learn about the potential of pipeline-based hydrogen for Europe. To make this webinar a more interactive event, we greatly encourage our audience to raise questions in the Q&A box, as we really have an amazing lineup of speakers for you guys.
Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker on stage, Mr. Pedro Corrado from REN. And Mr. Pedro Corrado will give a keynote speech on REN's role for establishing the H2 MAD and its role for the hydrogen development in Iberian area. So Pedro, the stage is open for you right now. Please take your stage and start your presentation.
So are you hearing me? Hello? Hello, are you hearing me? Hello?
Hello, Pedro. We can hear you
okay.
right now. Please.
Thank you. I was waiting some feedback. Thank you. Let just me share my screen. Sorry. So let's start it. Well, first of all, yes.
Sorry, Pedro.
Yes.
I think you are using the presenter mode. Can you try to change this mode and make your presentation in full display?
Sorry. Is it already in full display right now?
Yes, but it's actually the presenter mode that's for your side. You can click this mode and try to make it full display.
And now?
Yes, it's in full display right now. Please start.
Perfect. Sorry. Oops. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, we are seeing the presentation, but it's still not in So
Yeah, now it's okay, isn't it?
Okay. Right now it's okay.
Okay. Okay. It's okay. Thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank the opportunity to the organization that gave to me to be here presenting the main activities that REN has been done under H2, and namely regarding H2 MET project. So for my presentation today, I will split it in 4 main blocks. First of all, a brief presentation on what is REN. Also a brief presentation of European and Portuguese framework for H2. And the third part, I hope, will be the most interesting part. I will present you our main activities for H2, what we are doing on H2 and also on H2 MET project. Finally, I will finalize my presentation with main messages that I would like to retain from this section. So, for who doesn't know REN, what is REN and what is our purpose? Well, REN is an infrastructure operator that has the most of its activities in Portugal. And as infrastructure operators, our main mission is, of course, to ensure the quality, the safety, and the security of supply of our consumers, contributing to the development of our communities and also to the improvement of their quality of lives. In fact, we work very close to our communities, and nowadays we have already more than 10% of our employees working in volunteering activities. And just to have an idea, we have already planted more than 100,000 trees in Portugal. But what is, in fact, our business portfolio? As I said before, REN is mostly present in Portugal. And in Portugal, we are the sole TSO, transmission system operators of electricity and gas system. And we also operate 3 additional public concessions in Portugal: a distribution network in the north of the country, underground storage of gas in the center of the country, and the operation of LNG terminal in the south of our country. Additionally, we also supply telecommunication service to the consumers and to the producers that are connected to our infrastructures. REN also started its internalization process some years ago, and we are currently present in Chile, operating more than around 100 kilometers of transmission electricity lines and 5 substations. And also we have a participation in a company called Eletrobras, which operates a pipeline which connects an LNG turbine in Chile to the major urban center of that country named Santiago. But what has REN already done in terms of decarbonization? Well, Portugal started its decarbonization process in the beginning of our century. And with the support of network operators, namely from REN, we created the conditions that in order that we nowadays are able to reach in our electricity generation needs around 60% of renewable penetration. In fact, nowadays we have more than 5 gigawatts of onshore wind installed in our system, more than 1 gigawatt of solar, and around 9 gigawatts of hydro. This in an electricity system with a peak load of around 9.5 gigawatts of consumption, peak load. And for the future, Portuguese government, aligned with European policies, has very ambitious targets to 2030. In fact, the goal is to reach more than 80% of renewable penetration on electricity system. And in order to reach that, we should adapt our infrastructures to have in total installed capacity around 9 gigawatts of solar, 9 gigawatts of onshore wind, and 10 gigawatts of offshore wind in Portugal. In the gas sector, and considering the huge potential for renewables in Portugal, government already published a strategy for H2, which is in fact under revision. But in terms of infrastructures, the goal is, as Portugal doesn't have parallel pipelines, in order to start the decarbonization of our gas system, we should start with blendings of H2 with natural gas. And the target for 2030 is to reach 10 to 50% of H2 in our pipelines blended with natural gas. Of course, this experience is very useful to Chile, which already has also ambitious targets for the decarbonization process. And of course, all the lessons learned we have in Europe will be translated for Chile, of course. Focusing now a little bit more on H2, what is a brief framework about Portuguese, a brief introduction to the framework of H2 in Europe and in Portugal. Both Portugal and the European Commission stated to reach carbon neutrality in 2050. Nevertheless, and as a consequence of the Ukraine war, European Commission reinforced its targets in order to accelerate the decarbonization process and reduce energy dependence from Russia. In terms of H2, REPowerEU states that the European Commission should reach in 2030 the production of domestic H2 of around 10 million tons and complement it with additional imports of H2 of another 10 million tons, which is a very ambitious targets, and of course needs the development of several things, namely of infrastructure. In Portugal, I already said the main targets. As I said, the main targets for H2 are under revision. Nevertheless, there is something that I would like to state here, is that considering the first publication of H2 strategy in Portugal, and Portugal not only fixed the target to reach 1 to 5% of H2 blended with natural gas in networks into 2025 and 10 to 15% in 2030, but also published legislation which obligates TSOs to adapt their networks to achieve these goals. And in this sense, and considering this framework, under H2, of course, REN developed a lot of activities in order to become this possible. Today, I will focus mainly on the ones that are related with H2 MET project, but there is a lot of work to do that we are, let's say, putting in place in order to make this a reality in the near future. So in terms of activities that REN is being developed, REN joined European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative, which is an initiative which is composed by 31 TSOs, where basically these 31 TSOs assess several scenarios in order to identify the main needs in terms of infrastructure that are need to do in order to make possible to achieve the targets stated in the REPowerEU. As a main conclusions, more relevant conclusions, I would highlight that existing infrastructure is available, and together with combined with the new pipelines, it is probably a very efficient way of achieve a competitive and sustainable H2 market. In addition, they identified 5 corridors in order to bring the H2 production to the center, to the H2 demand centers, where Portugal is part of the Corridor B, which aims to bring green H2 production from North Africa and Iberian Peninsula and France to the center of Europe. In national terms, and considering the legislation that I told you before, REN designed and having the obligation to accommodate in the gas pipelines 10 to 15% of H2 blended with natural gas in 2030, REN designed in this developing an asset compliance program in order with the main goal of basically certified infrastructure technically to receive H2. And basically we are performing this in two stages. First, to certify the infrastructure to receive blendings. And in the second stage, we want to certify the infrastructure to be completely repurposed to 100% of H2. And how are we performing this? Basically, we designed a program which is split in several blocks. First of all, identify the gap analysis, what you need to do to become this reality. Second, update our operation and engineering procedures, basically redefine technical requirements, design blending stations, training our human capital. Also, we would like to identify exactly what is the capacity of the existing pipelines to receive these H2, either in blendings, either 100% H2, and also we would like to update our gas tracking system to accommodate H2 here, namely to monitor the quality when we have H2 blended with natural gas. And resulting of this work, we should identify the investment roadmaps for these two stages in order to be possible to perform these investments and certify technically our infrastructure as fully ready to receive H2. This is a target that we want to conclude in terms of asset compliance program by 2024. Complementary, and as a result of the several studies that are being done national and at international level, namely at European level, also Portugal, Spain, and France governments agreed and announced to develop the first major H2 green corridor of REPowerEU, named H2Med. And what consists basically the H2Med? H2Med basically is supported for two main projects. As I said before, H2Med wants to implement the Corridor B of European Backbone Initiative. And basically, to support all this project, we have two central interconnections. An interconnection between Portugal and Spain named CELSA, and an additional interconnection between Spain and France named Barmar. With the construction of these interconnections and some internal projects, the main goal is to create conditions to export hydrogen from Iberian Peninsula to France and to the center of Europe. And in terms of REN activities under these projects, what are the main activities? Basically, and of course, REN is in charge for the Portuguese projects that are being developed to be part of the H2Med. And under this project, we have, of course, the Portuguese routing of the interconnection between Portugal and Spain, which consists in the completely new H2 pipeline of around 160 kilometers and with a transmission capacity and export capacity of around 750 kilotons per year. Nevertheless, just constructing interconnection, of course, it's not enough. We need to create conditions to harvesting the green H2 production in Portugal and to collect it to the interconnection and export it to the center of Europe. And in this sense, REN is developing two additional projects. The enabler projects to be this export of hydrogen a reality. And these projects, there are two enablers. The enabler A, where we want to harvesting the green H2 production capacity from offshore wind, onshore wind, and some solar. This enabler A is composed by repurposing pipelines and the construction also of a part of a new pipeline. And the enabler B, which is in interior zone of Portugal, where there is a huge potential for solar electricity generation, which could support also the green H2 production in Portugal and collect it to the interconnection to export to Europe. And together with these projects altogether consists constitutes, let's say, the CELSA interconnection. And in this sense, we already submitted it to European Commission as project of common interest in order to be assessed. And our expected commissioning date is 2030. Of course, as this project combines new pipelines together with repurposing pipelines, the asset compliance program that REN is developing is crucial in order to certify technically these repurposings to be part of this project and in order that this can be a reality in 2030. So, as main messages, existing gas infrastructures are available and are relevant for achieving not only Portuguese but also EU targets. And they are also relevant to ensure a competitive and sustainable H2 market development in Europe. H2Med could be the first major green H2 corridor of REPowerEU, interconnection Iberian Peninsula and France to the center of Europe. As part of H2Med, REN is developing the Portuguese projects for the CELSA interconnection, combining not only new pipelines, but also repurposing of existing infrastructure. And in this sense, certifying the repurposing of these infrastructures to be technical ready to receive hydrogen is, of course, a critical part to become this project a reality. That's all from my side. Now I'm available for questions. I hope my presentation could reach your goals for today. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pedro, for your kind sharing. That's a very solid presentation. And during your presentation, we've also received so many questions from our audience, and I'm sure they're sticking to have your answers to their questions. As we all know, like hydrogen molecules are actually smaller than natural gas molecules, which can make them more difficult to contain and transport. Additionally, hydrogen has unique properties that can impact the safety and the efficiency of pipeline transportations. So do you think it's possible to transport 100% hydrogen by pipeline based on your experience and understanding?
Thank you very much for the question, first of all. This is a doubt that we have heard a lot in the few months, years. What I can say in this regard is that the studies we are carrying out, yes, it's possible to transport hydrogen in pipelines, namely in existing gas pipelines. There is some adaptations that are needed regarding existing gas pipelines, namely measure equipments and others. Nevertheless, with the information we have today, and of course the studies are going on, there is some, we need to have some special care of some conditions, namely regarding the number of inspection we should perform to the pipelines. But with the information we have today, yes, it's possible, and not only is possible, we should do it in order to, let's say, reduce costs of implementing an infrastructure of H2 in Europe.
Okay. So Pedro, as we know, like Portugal and Spain are actually becoming really important producers of hydrogen and renewable gases in the short term due to their abundant renewable resources. And to export this renewable hydrogen, I'm actually wondering whether it's more, economically and technologically feasible to transport hydrogen by new undersea pipeline or by the existing pipeline between the Iberia area and the other area of Europe.
Sorry, I'm hearing not perfectly. Can you repeat?
Okay, so our audience is actually wondering whether it's more, economically or technologically feasible to transport the hydrogen by new undersea pipeline or by the existing pipeline between Iberia and the rest of Europe.
Well, the figures we have right now, and which are basically the conclusion also of European Hydrogen Initiative, is that probably the most efficient way to do it, with the figures again we have today, is to combine the existing infrastructure, the existing pipelines together with probably the construction of new pipelines to combine it well, by combining these both solutions probably is the best way to do it. We take advantage from an infrastructure that already exists, which of course is always useful to potentiate the H2 market, is something that is available and we can use it. Why should we not use something that already is available to enable a market? And of course, part of the infrastructure, of course, there are new location of generation, new location of consumption, and in this sense, we should, of course, construct new pipelines to achieve these regions. But combining these two realities will be probably the best way to decarbonize the overall gas system and to promote the H2 market in Europe.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much for your really detailed answers in the presentation. And also during your presentation, as you may notice, we've also received so many interesting questions from our audience. But right now, as we are running out of time for your session, afterwards, you're also free to answer these questions in the Q&A box and shine lights on the questions for our audience. Thank you so much for your participation, Link. Pedro?
Okay, thank you. Thank you from my side.
Thank you, and also,
okay, sorry.
With RUN's involvement and support, I'm sure the new transit routes will also be opened up for gas and LNG imported by Portugal and Spain to be sent to the energy demand centers in Europe. And I hope we could still have, Mr. Pedro's insights at our upcoming in-person events connecting Green Hydrogen Europe 2023 in Madrid this July. Right now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our second keynote speaker on stage, Mr. Olli Sipilä, CEO from Gasgrid Finland. Olli will deliver a case sharing of Gasgrid Finland's Nordic Hydrogen Route and how it will accelerate the creation of the European hydrogen economy. Hi, Olli, the floor is open for you right now. Please take your stage and turn off your camera and all devices.
Thank you. Is it working now? Apologies, I had some technical problems earlier, but it seems to be solved now, and it was great to Pedro being able to open the session. I think the order was also well in that way. Are you hearing me good?
Yep, we can hear you good right now. You can start your presentation.
Very good. Do you see the presentation now?
Yes, but I suggest you to make a full display so that we can have a better picture of your slides.
Okay, let's see. Is this the...
Yep, it's in full display. Everything's perfect.
Excellent. Okay, very good. So thanks for having me. I'm Olli Sipilä, CEO of Gasgrid Finland, a newly established hydrogen grids company within the Gasgrid family. And this starting picture pretty much illustrates the weather today in Finland. Quite cold, end of February. These are the conditions. Also in the carbon neutral or carbon negative world, we need to be ready to respond, and therefore also the hydrogen plays a key role on that. Of course, as we all know, the transition from biomass-based to fossil-based energy, or in terms of oil, coal, and gas, took roughly 100 years plus to accomplish, and now we need to do the other way around to replace much of the fossil energy forms in a few decades. So that's a challenge, I guess, the infrastructures and societies have not encountered before, and we need something new, and I will present one way here in the Nordics how we have started to tackle this challenge of magnitude and pace in this transition in energy field. So Gasgrid Finland, we are the gas transmission system operator of Finland. You see the southern part there. Our currently methane network consists roughly 1,300 kilometers of methane infrastructure, mainly one pipeline-based asset, few pipeline areas where a double pipeline, where I come to a bit later. We are connected to the Baltic gas market, and through that to Poland and continental Europe. And as you all know, the energy crisis, given the war in Ukraine, required fast-paced move, and we launched also LNG project, which completed in a record time, 4 to 6 months, depending where you start counting on. But today I'm more about discussing about these hydrogen-based flagship projects, what we are really keenly looking forward to. However, I would say this Inco terminal was one kind of a flagship project developed in such a fast pace, where you needed to build infrastructure, where you needed the create safety and operational procedures to a large scale operations, as well as you needed to create a market operations, market functioning rules and regulations under quite deeply regulated business area, what is the gas market in the Nordics, especially where the market structures support highly open commercial market. So therefore, all the rules and regulations needs to be developed to quite deep and long extent in order to then the market players, buyers and sellers, being able to create commercial contracts on top of that. And that's especially in today's volatility, quite important matter. But this step leads us to the hydrogen economy. There's a few studies in Europe saying that if Europe wants to be carbon neutral, you must electrify whatever you can electrify. But based on the analysis, in a fully electrified world, there's still some industries needing molecules for some reason or the others. Approximately in results in different studies show 20 to 30% of European energy used will still be molecules, pure hydrogen, hydrogen derivatives like ammonia, methanol, synthetic methane, or even a current methane, so bio or natural gas, with or without carbon capture and storage in various forms. So therefore, you need have, in addition to the current methane infrastructure market and current electricity market, you need to have some form of hydrogen market having in combination complementing qualities for the clean societies. If I take an example of Finland, where we stand today, actually the figures behind this analysis, which I'm about to present, are a bit old. This is based on the projects which has inquired grid connection for a Finnish transmission system operator of electricity, Fingrid's network. And roughly a year ago, it was 150 gigawatts of wind, onshore wind, mainly some solar, some offshore wind, asking the connection. And this is based on those 150,000 megawatts, 150 gigawatts. Today, the figure is more than 200 gigawatts in Finland alone. But if you turn this 150 gigawatts into a electricity from wind and solar, you get roughly 500 terawatt hours of clean electricity. If you combine current clean electricity in Finland, 77 terawatt hours, then you reduce the current and estimated future electricity demand in Finland, you end up the additional net potential for renewable electricity in Finland being 442 terawatt hours. Okay, if we want to turn that into a hydrogen, you get, of course, electrolysis losses, and as my cover picture showed, you quite often need heat, and that's the mainly electrolysis losses is the heat. So converting that heat to a district heating or other heat needs in the Nordics gets additional benefits. You reduce the fossil fuels to create the heat currently, or a bio-based heating forms where then the biomass can be directed to more value-added uses. And you end up with the amount of hydrogen, which is a 300 terawatt hours level. And what that is level, it turns out to be that is roughly almost 50% of the Repower EU H2 target by 2030. So we are talking about a massive potential of clean hydrogen within Europe. And I see also a good example by Pedro earlier presentation. We see similar potential across the Europe in order to make Europe more self-sufficient in terms of clean electricity and enable this transition. But why you are just not using the electrons? As mentioned, some of the qualities of the molecules are needed on the user side, but also on the logistical side, the transmission side. You just necessarily cannot build the power lines needing to transmit that energy. Here's an example in Kiruna in northern Sweden. The LKAB, the mining company, has announced that if they want to be fully carbon neutral, they would need 70 terawatt hours of electricity there, or hydrogen. And transmitting the electricity there as electrons would require 7 huge, several hundred meters gateways as electrical power lines, or just one hydrogen pipeline. So it comes a capex efficiency in gases. It can be 2 to 15 times more capital efficient per euro or dollar to get energy transmit, especially in larger volumes and distances. You get also the land use efficiency. You get storage efficiency. Here is shown as a large-scale hydrogen rock formation storage. If we compare that to a battery electricity storage, it's roughly 1 to 2% per kilowatt hour cost what we are looking in the hydrogen storage, and of course the molecule system is balanced in hours or days in the best way, not in milliseconds or seconds as in electricity. So hydrogen provides new features to the energy systems, complementing, supporting the features that are currently in electrons and methane. And this is the reason I personally see that it's important to have also these logistical solutions for years to come. But there's also a challenge. We have what we call chicken or egg, wait and see problems, because consumers, off-takers are waiting, producers and suppliers are waiting, infrastructure providers, TSOs are waiting, and of course the governments are waiting. So there's this kind of a challenge how to move forward when everything is in such an early phase. And in Gasgrid, we decided that we start fast and big in order to remove one uncertainty away from this 4-area equation, which would then hopefully enable all other areas to move even faster than without a infrastructure providers to move forward. This is needed in order to reach decarbonization efficiently and in a secure way. And that's the reason why we have launched 3 different projects connecting together a Nordic Hydrogen Route, Baltic Sea Hydrogen Collector, and Nordic Baltic Hydrogen Corridor in order to create this market in addition to the infrastructure, accompanying the whole Finland and Baltics and Sweden. Of course, since the gas has been a medium or in minor role in our national energy systems, we don't have triple, even sometimes to 7 times pipelines as in some places in continental Europe. This is mainly pure hydrogen new grids to link this a clean power based hydrogen to European and local businesses. But it's not a easy task. Today, my colleague Sara will speak more about Nordic Hydrogen Route in detail, but this is our one of the flagship projects, 1,000 kilometers, 3.5 billion euros, enabling 35 billion investments. But what this really means underneath this process is actually a huge task of first, you need to create through this flagship project a regional, national and corporate strategy. You need to innovate regulations and policies. You need to facilitate the market and engage different stakeholders from the smallest municipality to European or global level decision makers or financiers. Then, of course, the funding needs to be secured and structured in various formats throughout the process. And of course, there you have the technology choices. Although there's more than 5,000 kilometers of hydrogen grids already in the world, you need to have new features there, how you plan and design. And then, of course, the construction and permitting and land use needs to be done in faster than ever. And all this requires quite a lot of R&D in all respects, even before the final investment decision, when it then turns to be a more classical company-based strategy and implementation projects. But you need to create a market and infrastructure and this whole ecosystem while you are in a company level planning your own procedures. So quite a task. And what we believe is that through a very open and intensive cooperation within the country, between the countries and players, you are at least have a chance to complete this in time in less than 10 years. And this is what the Gasgrid is trying to do at the moment. So we are creating market-based, a joint infrastructure in order to create efficient, secure, and speedy transition to the clean electricity and hydrogen-based future in Europe, and for getting these benefits through infrastructure like storage or complementing resources to reduce scheduling and other risks. The infrastructure reduces investments at the point of location on both of supply and demand side, which of course speeds the transition, and on one important factor on top of the physical infrastructure and markets, you can create financial markets, which then can facilitate commercial risk management and financing arrangement. And of course, these new growth markets needs also innovation in all levels, regulatory, technical, and operational. So when you start doing through these big flagship projects, you are experimenting different things, and you're learning, which then can be shared across the region or throughout the globe through the cooperation mechanisms like the European Hydrogen Backbone Network and others. And this is the Gasgrid's approach, and we are happy to cooperate within this. And now I'm happy to answer if there's some questions.
All right, Olli, I very much appreciate your impressive explanations on Gasgrid Finland's role in establishing the Nordic Hydrogen Route and accelerating the creation of European hydrogen backbones. And during your presentation, some of our audience have proposed some really interesting questions for you to answer. So I like to select one question for you to answer. As we know that even though hydrogen is seen as a really promising alternative to fossil fuel, one of the challenges of using hydrogen as a fuel is actually difficult to store and transport. And the existing storage methods are often expensive and require a lot of spaces. So could you please share us with your thoughts on what are the challenges to use the existing Gasgrid as hydrogen storage in Europe, and why its transition is actually quite slow at the current stage?
The current gas grid, so the methane grids, you can blend, and we see a 3%, 5%, even 10 to 20% is something to achievable in the current methane network of blending. But it's not, to me, a challenge on the grid side or the infrastructure side. It's more on the end user side. So if you have a gas turbine plant or a chemical plant, it typically has a quite strict demands on the quality of the methane. So if you go from, let's say, current methane having hydrogen content of 1%, if you would go to 5%, it can create that this chemical plant, for example, must need a huge investments in order to cope this quality change. And I see that more the challenge on the blending side. Of course, we need to enable blending and so forth to start the industry. But I still see that the current methane network can be even a storage for the synthetic methane or biomethane more efficiently than a trying to blend pure hydrogen to the methane and create new challenges there. Pure hydrogen is more valuable in its purest formats when it's used or redefined to the derivatives like ammonia. So this is how we see it.
Okay, thank you, Olli, for your answer. And we also have a question from our Q&A box from one of our audience named Patrick Sambone. And he wants to know that what can Gasgrid and Nordic and other mentor institution to help investors and industry players to build solid business cases for investments that are based upon forecasting, modeling, and stimulating different scenarios. So could you please answer these questions?
Well, I think the main thing is to get the demand signals, the investment signal correct in European scale. If we talk Europe, and it's happening, so there's some important regulations finding their place and that's one thing, to get the demand signals in order then to hydrogen producers and the companies who produce these derivatives or pure hydrogen. Like green steel, for example, to get a business cases up and running. And in the meantime, we need to cooperate to innovatively develop these market structures. For example, a lot of hydrogen users or producers who connect us today are more interested in, can we store hydrogen in your pipelines or through your pipelines? For example, here in the picture, you see in Latvia, the Inčukans, that's the gas storage, which currently stores methane. And that could be one place for seasonal storage of hydrogen as well in Latvia. So creating these cross-border opportunities for companies. And these are the areas we need to engage with different stakeholders to understand their needs and then create physical or regulatory or rule-based market to fulfill those needs. So a lot of cooperation in addition to these market signals for investments.
Okay, thank you, Ali, for your really informative and sharing and generous answers to the questions. It's really thought-provoking, and I really hope the Nordic Hydrogen Route will further drive the decarbonizations and support the regional green and industrializations and economic development for European hydrogen independence. And now let's move on to the third keynote session of today's webinar. Please join me to welcome Mr. Xavier Rousseau, the Senior Vice President from Snam S.p.A. And Xavier will deliver a keynote speech on Snam's story of upgrading the 30,000 kilometer network of pipeline for hydrogen in Europe. So Xavier, the floor is open for you right now. Please start your presentation.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I hope you can hear me and see me, or at least hear me.
Sorry, Xavier, we actually can't see you right now. Can you please try to turn on your camera?
That's what I'm trying to do. Okay, sounds weird. It's not working. I mean, just for the sake of time, I think that let me start sharing the presentation. I'm really sorry that the camera is not working, but at least I hope you can see pages.
This is where we can see it in full display, and you can go ahead.
Okay, so so we went south in Europe, in Portugal, then we went north in Finland, and now we are back in the southern part of Europe, and basically following a bit the presentation of the colleagues that anticipate me. I will complement it with the view from Italy and from the Mediterranean areas on the future of the infrastructure of hydrogen in Europe. So there is no snow like Olli showed before. I mean, for Finland, but I mean we have countries with a lot of consumption of gas today in Southern Europe, in Italy in particular. And we have a lot of things to do to decarbonize also the consumption of molecules in the southern of Europe. So here is just one slide presenting Snam, just as a reminder of the company that I'm presenting. Snam is present mainly in Italy with transport, storage, and regasification of natural gas. We are now in the process of adding new sources of gas, new FSRU, so floating vessels in Italy, and we are in a position in the Mediterranean area, bridging a bit North Africa to Europe. So we have already several entry points for gas coming from the south, coming from Algeria, from Libya, from TAP, which is basically the Azeri gas, and also connected to the north of Europe through Germany and Switzerland to Netherlands and Norway, but also with the Russian border through the TAG and the pipelines is coming from the east. So this is a situation of Italy and the situation of Snam that owns this asset in Italy, but also is owns shares of asset in the rest of Europe. So we are present in Austria, we are present in southern France, in Greece as well with DESFA, and more recently we acquired the pipeline coming from Tunisia to Italy. The two other part is the storage part, which is has a very important role in coping with the seasonality demand of gas. So we are present in more than 20 BCM of capacity of storage in Europe, and an additional 20 BCM of regasification capacity. So that's the situation where Snam starts mainly on the natural gas side. As all our previous speakers presented, we are also part of the European backbone. So we started the process back in 2018. It has been a journey that we develop in the backbone discussion. So we started with asking ourselves a question: does it make sense to have biomethane and hydrogen in our energy mix in Europe? And we found out that there is savings if we are using also green molecules and not just green electrons. So more than 200 billion euros of saving per year by 2050 can be achieved by using hydrogen and biomethane in the mix. So after understanding the savings, then we went to the role of the infrastructure, and we estimate and we analyze the value of having the molecules, the green molecule, transported in using the infrastructure. And as a final step, we look at these 5 corridors that you see on the map. These are the 5 main corridors that we estimate as being will be the one that will flow the hydrogen in Europe, moving the hydrogen basically from the places where it's produced more cheaply to the places where there is a gap of consumptions, which is mainly the central part of Europe. We did a similar exercise, and we look in details at the situation in Italy as well. So in Italy, we are developing since 2019 joint scenarios with our power TSO company, so the Terna, the power company in Italy, and Snam is producing joint scenarios since 2019. And we look together at what's the outlook of the energy mix in Italy. And we found out that there is a big role for biomethane and hydrogen in the energy mix by 2050. The point for Italy is that, this future consumption of hydrogen is not equally spread in the country, it's not heterogeneous, but actually it's mostly concentrated in some areas, mainly in the north part of Italy, the industrial areas in the north of Italy. Some areas in Puglia and Sicily, those are the areas where hydrogen will be consumed most because of the current use as a feedstock or as part of the industry. So these are the areas where hydrogen will be consumed. At the opposite, where we see that hydrogen could be produced using natural resources, is mostly from the south of the country, or even from the import outside of Italy, basically North Africa. So where you have the great resources for solar and also the land availability to produce it. So what I mean is of course required in that picture is an infrastructure that can transport it from basically from south to north, the hydrogen in Italy, and basically also connecting the export for using it in Europe. So what is peculiar of the project that we are running is that first, I mean, you start with a clear advantage, which is the fact that we have parallel pipelines in Italy and also connecting neighboring countries. So we have 2 to 3 pipelines in parallel. So we can repurpose one of those pipelines in using hydrogen, while at the same time using the other one with the flow of CH4 for natural gas that we need to flow anyway from North Africa also to Europe. So we have 70% of our project is repurposed, so using existing one plus some new build that need to reinforce a bit the asset and the grid that we have in Italy. In addition to the part on the transport, we do also have a project on the storage side, because we do recognize that there is a clear role for storage, but also is also required to compensate for a seasonal shift, but also more shortly shift of production of hydrogen and consumption of hydrogen. So for those reasons, I mean, we are looking at converting some of the storage capacity that we have in Italy and use it for hydrogen. So as I mentioned, I mean, the corridor is spreading from south to north. One of the clear elements that we have seen as an element that we tackle quite early was the value chain approach to the backbone. So we raised, I mean, and we started to have discussions with potential off-takers of hydrogen, as well as potential producers of hydrogen, mainly, as I said, North Africa and Southern Italy, to have a competitive production of hydrogen and off-takers that can take it. So we recognize that, I mean, there is quite a significant volume that can be used for hydrogen along the route, but also in Central Europe. So the offtake potentially is close to 9 million tons of hydrogen per year, and we have already LOI, so basically a letter of intent of producers that can produce up to 3 million tons per year in Southern Italy and in North Africa. The last element that I wanted to show on the approach that we're taking is, of course, the asset readiness, since we are looking at reusing the existing one, and we have several elements along the route to be ready for hydrogen. This is a journey that we started a few years ago. The first part, I mean, we tested the readiness of the pipeline. So the 33,000 kilometers of pipeline that we have installed in Italy, 99% of those are ready to transport hydrogen. On a technical angle, 70% of those without any reduction of the pressures. The remaining 30%, I mean, will require a certain reduction of the pressure to be used with hydrogen. But the good news is that, I mean, almost 100% of the assets are ready. Of course, there are other elements that you need to look at. First is compressor stations, and we started look at into the into the blending of mix in the existing gas turbines at up to 10%. We did a test last year using a mix of hydrogen and natural gas. And we know, of course, that there are available out there compressor station for using 100% of hydrogen. Then the storage part, we verified the possibility of storing up to 100% of hydrogen in lab test at the moment, and we are doing now also additional tests to make it at an industrial level, so testing with the different size that we have for storage, as well as we have different initiatives in place with the final users in order to test with them their capacity to use and take hydrogen. So we did both as a blending. For example, we did a test of 30% blending with a steel company, in north of Italy, but also we are testing directly pure use of hydrogen. So here was, my presentation. I make it a bit quick also to save some of the time for Q&A, and I'm happy to take questions if there are.
Okay, Xaver, thank you so much for your sharing with us and the introduction of Snam's strategies for transforming its infrastructure for hydrogen transport and storage, and defining the roadmap for integrating hydrogen into the existing energy systems. I'm sure they will enable the development of the hydrogen supply chain, not only at the Italian level, but also at the whole European level. Here I also have some really interesting questions from our audience, the pre-registered audience and online audience, and we just can't wait to hear your answers to these questions. The first question from our audience, he wants to know what does the blending of hydrogen with natural gas have in your mind? What role does blending of hydrogen with natural gas have in your mind? And how do you think it will be commercialized in the future in terms of the pricing models or the other considerations?
Thanks for the questions. So, we do see the future, as pure hydrogen. So in the long run, for sure, pure hydrogen will be the vector, and we will have pipelines running with pure hydrogen, because that's basically the ending game, and that's where there is more value on using hydrogen. Of course, there is a transition period, and there is gas is flowing in the pipes as well at the moment. So we think that blending could be things to leverage in Europe to start decarbonize the existing consumption, because also the advantage of blending is that basically it's reaching all the consumption point at the same time. So in virtually basically consuming hydrogen for every type of consumers, while the hydrogen, the pure hydrogen, you need to connect from A to Z directly the consumption point from the production point. So you need to have the full infrastructure in place. While for blending, you can start to do it now. Of course, there is you need to put a value on the hydrogen, which is included into the gas grid. So you cannot basically waste hydrogen into that. So that could be some option for using some of the guarantee of origin, for example, of hydrogen that can be used, while putting the blending into the gas grid, and then used to compensate for the consumers of hydrogen are consuming already today hydrogen, and we know that those consumers are basically mostly consuming gray hydrogen, so they need to decarbonize it. So you can also think of a virtual way to compensate their greenness of the hydrogen while putting blending into the gas grid, and someone else is consuming it. So there are options for finding a way to put a value on the blending. I think it's an opportunity. I think it's something that could be used to start the market, because you will start to have projects developing hydrogen where is cheap, where natural resources are, and not in a very expensive way, just because you need to have pure hydrogen from day one. So that it's an option. The future is anyway pure hydrogen, and that's pure decarbonized hydrogen, by the way. But blending could be an option also for the transition.
Okay, Xaver, thank you so much for your answers. And also during your presentation, as you mentioned, there may be a problem or concern about the end users. So how does Snam approach the end user problem that we have just heard? This is a question from our audience named John.
Mm-hmm. So we took an approach of looking at what are the type of consumptions that could raise from hydrogen. And we started to test with them different options of blending, of use of pure hydrogen, and so on and so forth. So we are part of various consortium association to test the use of hydrogen, and we're basically working together with several industrial players in testing those options. So as I mentioned, we did different tests for blending. For example, we tested a 5 to 10% first in a couple of consumption points in southern of Italy, connected to our assets. So we used that blending. We tested the 30%, as I mentioned, a steel company. And we're also looking at who is willing to consume 100% and when they will be ready for that. We are also working with them to understand exactly what are the different elements that need to be changed. Of course, metering, of course, all the connection points and so on. But those one are continuous work that we are doing to improve a bit our knowledge on that front.
Okay, Xaver, thanks again for your really generous and persuasive answers. And I wish we could still have the opportunity to exchange opinion with you at our upcoming in-person conference, Connecting Green Hydrogen Europe 2023 in Madrid. Accelerate the development of hydrogen infrastructure in European Union. A project known as European Hydrogen Backbone was proposed in November 2020, which seeks to establish a hydrogen pipeline network that will connect hydrogen production sites with industrial, transport, and a residential area across Europe. So in the next panel discussion, we'll have the honor to join 7 leading TSO, DSOs, and energy associations to have a comprehensive discussion on their perspective of hydrogen infrastructure repurposing, financing, permitting procedures, and cross-border partnership. And please allow me to introduce our 7 established panel members. Mr. Tobias from GAIS Infrastructure Europe, Ms. Sara from European Hydrogen Backbone and Gasgrid Finland, Ms. Giulia Branzi from Snam S.p.A, Mr. Luis Janeiro from IRENA, Ms. Bruno O'Hagan from Eurogas, Mr. Stefan Crane from Entres, and Mr. Ermo Andini from OGE. And Tobias will be the panel moderator for this session. Hi, Tobias, please take your stage and start your presentation. And also, before this panel, we noticed that there are so many really interesting questions in the Q&A box, and we really encourage you to select some of the questions in the Q&A box to involve them in a panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Holman. Good morning, everyone. My first question after 3 years of virtual meetings still valid. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you well right now.
Perfect. That's great to hear. Thanks for the confirmation. So yeah, good morning and welcome to this interesting and timely panel discussion called European Hydrogen Backbone, Coordinating and Accelerating EU Hydrogen Transport Infrastructure Development in an Integrated Manner. My name is Tobias Bühnen, and I'm representing Gas Infrastructure Europe, which is the European association representing transmission, storage, and distribution and terminal operators of national gas. And I'm happy to moderate this session today. Last year, I think we all learned about the relevance and even the urgency to develop the hydrogen market very quickly. And the REPowerEU targets are widely known and can be mentioned here in this context. But the development of the hydrogen market already started before, and many regulatory initiatives have been launched both at European and national level. And one key element within the whole picture is the development of hydrogen transport infrastructure to enable the connection of hydrogen supply and demand centers. And for this, I am very happy to welcome a great selection of experts to discuss the transport element of the hydrogen economy today with us. Instead of introducing them all by myself, I would like to give the floor to each panelist to briefly introduce themselves before starting our discussion, and to also briefly highlight the role of the company, the institution, the association that you are representing in the context also of hydrogen transport. So I would just briefly hand over to all of you, maybe Ms. Sara Kärki from Gasgrid Finland. Would you like to start? I think we cannot hear you.
How about now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. good. The technical issues are still here with us, even though we have tried to practice. Okay, but very nice to be here. My name is Sara Kärki. I'm coming from Gasgrid Finland. I'm working at Gasgrid Finland as a Senior Vice President on our hydrogen development. We have also established a daughter company called Gasgrid Vetyverkot Oy, Gasgrid Hydrogen Grids, and working there as our Chief Operating Officer. Then I have the pleasure to represent also here the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative and co-chairing that together with Maria Cecilia from Enagas, and very nice to be here in this discussion today. Still a couple of words maybe from our company's perspective on the hydrogen development. We are a gas transmission system operator, but also have been mandated by our government to develop the national hydrogen infrastructure and cross-border collaboration and hydrogen market development. So very here today discussing about these important topics.
Thank you very much, Sara. Over to you, Giulia Branzi from Snam.
Hello, hi everyone. Hope you can hear me well. So Giulia Branzi from Snam. I'm head of climate policies. So I won't take too much time because Xavier, my colleague, has already introduced Snam. But basically, just to present myself, I lead the Snam policy work both at European level, at national level, in all key policy areas. So there is a lot clearly going on at European level at the moment, but also the implementation is starting at national level. So yeah. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Giulia. Over to you, Bronagh O'Hagan from Eurogas.
Thank you, Tobias. Good morning, everybody. It's great to join you today. We are Eurogas is a Brussels-based trade association, so we represent a number of different parts of the gas value chain, be it wholesale or retail markets, but also, and I think interesting for today, the distribution system operators. It's a challenging time indeed that we're in, and at Eurogas we take this responsibility very seriously in terms of responding to the dual crises, let's say, in terms of climate emergency and also energy supply right now. And a very important part of dealing with that for us is, of course, as we get more renewable power online, that we have the gases to store that, including hydrogen. So plenty to discuss this morning, I'm sure, but I'll make one more point before I hand over to the next speaker. Also interesting for today, Eurogas is the official representative for gas sector employers in the European Commission's sectoral social dialogue for gas. So we're there with the trade unions, and I'll speak about skills today mostly in terms of the transition.
Thank you very much, Bronagh. And as next one, I would like to call Mr. Luis Janeiro from IRENA.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes. Yes.
Hello, everyone. So thank you very much for the kind invitation to IRENA. So IRENA is the International Renewable Energy Agency. We are an intergovernmental organization with 164 or 165 members. I don't know exactly the number now. And our job is to support our member countries in a transition towards sustainable energy, mostly with renewable energy. And let's say with regards to hydrogen, in the last few years, we've looked at hydrogen potential from multiple angles, from the technology perspective, from the regulatory perspective, from the trade perspective, looking at also the geopolitical implications, etc. So thank you very much for the kind invitation to IRENA.
Thank you very much, Luis. And next one, I would hand over to Mr. Dr. Stefan Krein from ONTRAS.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Stefan Krein. I'm the hydrogen program manager at ONTRAS and responsible for our activities around the H2 StartNet. I have a long history in the energy industry because I started in the 80s as a bricklayer for coke ovens. And after my studies, I'm in several natural gas companies in several positions. And now I'm at ONTRAS responsible for hydrogen. Not bad for a very short life. three energy sources, for example, from coal over natural gas to hydrogen. At ONTRAS, we have a program we called H2 StartNet. We have long experiences in natural gas and a little bit experiences in hydrogen. And we try to challenge these things.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And finally, over to you, Mr. Ermal Nindini from Open Grid Europe.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, let me thank you, the organizers, for the invitation. My name is Ermal Nindini. I work in the Department of Policy and Comms at Open Grid Europe, which is Germany's largest transmission system operator. We operate 12,000 kilometers of gas infrastructure. And of course, our commitment is to foster the energy transition towards a carbon neutral economy in Europe, which is very important, very relevant, as we have seen since last summer. And at OD, we are heavily committed to foster this transition and to build a hydrogen network. And I'm happy to be here to discuss these issues with you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you very much all for the introduction. And in order to kick off our actual discussion, I would like to ask you, Luis, to start by elaborating a bit on what are the most promising future applications and markets for green hydrogen from IRENA's perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, we've looked into this topic. Actually, the presentation before from Oli S.p.A, sorry for the pronunciation, actually touched a bit on this in a quite illustrative way. We've looked at the role of hydrogen in energy transition with 1.5 scenarios in mind, of course, for years. From our perspective, hydrogen makes sense for some applications where direct electrification is not an option yet, or is not going to be an option for decades to come. This means, for example, when we need hydrogen as part of the molecule or the industrial commodity that we are building, so for instance, ammonia, methanol. That means also, for instance, in the case of steel production, primary steel production, when we need it as a substitute for coal, there is a reactant agent. Or, for instance, when we need large volumes of storage to operate systems with high shares of variable renewables. Also, potentially to produce synthetic fuels, for instance, for aviation and shipping, to the extent that advanced biofuels, for instance, are not a complete solution for that. And in fact, recently we had a ministerial roundtable in our assembly, and we see a lot of action actually happening in international ports with regards to this, with perspective on synthetic fuels in the future. Now, just to give a sense of a scale, if we estimate these key uses of hydrogen, we estimate that around 12% of final energy consumption in a decarbonized global energy system would be hydrogen or hydrogen derivatives, and it will be responsible for 10% of the emission reduction. So when we look at in terms of volumes and in size, is a relatively modest role. On the other hand, it plays a critical role because it brings a solution for applications for which we don't have other options now. So also to give a sense of a scale, just to produce these 12% of final energy consumption, we would need to scale up the production of hydrogen sixfold from today's levels. And at the same time that we turn it renewable, because today's hydrogen is almost exclusively fossil. And we would require an amount of electricity comparable to the total electricity consumption of the world today, just to give a sense of the scale. So why I'm saying these numbers, just to put in context the amount of the size of the challenge to produce this clean hydrogen. So that means indeed this discussion is very timely because we need to be extremely judicious in how we develop the infrastructure for those specific priorities in mind. I think I will stop here so that I don't take more time from other speakers.
Thank you very much, Luis, for setting this also bigger picture and also alerting on the challenges. I would like to follow up on this by turning towards our panelists from the transmission system operators. How does this market environment translate into the concrete planning and implementation of your transport infrastructure projects? And ideally, can you give us some concrete examples how individual projects from your companies contribute and will contribute to the development of a pan-European hydrogen network? Maybe Sara, if you would like to start.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And maybe I start with the perspective from the European hydrogen backbone and then look from sort of a national or regional level after that briefly. And what is critical, as raised by also Luis, is that the transition is from the overall energy consumption maybe the most important or most significant from the volume perspective. But then on the other hand, for running our societies, this is a very critical change that needs to happen, and massive investments needed throughout the value chain, starting from the renewables and then production of hydrogen and further derivatives. But there is, of course, the infrastructure part, sort of the middleman in between, enabling this change. And the European hydrogen backbone, as presented already before, can be that piece of the puzzle to connect supply and demand. And in addition, I think that there is some major change going on as well from the other perspective. So going from centralized production of energy, like fossil energy, methane, for example, to more decentralized production. So this is a major change as well ongoing, and will also have implications on the infrastructure side. And this is very important from that perspective. And the European hydrogen backbone and the TSOs that have been gathering together have actually visioned pan-European infrastructure for hydrogen and a market. And then these visions are now concretely turning into projects. And I'm sure that we will hear a couple of more examples today. Then coming to the Nordic perspective and Finnish perspective, like Olli presented before, there is significant potential for renewable energy production in Finland and in the Nordics, around Baltic Sea more broadly. And we see that this potential can be used for fueling Europe in a wider sense of the meaning of that word in the future, and also allowing for development of new industries locally and decarbonizing the societies around Europe. And we have started those 3 projects that actually were already mentioned by Olli. So the Nordic Hydrogen Route, Nordic Baltic Hydrogen Corridor, and Baltic Sea Hydrogen Collector. And we work very closely with our neighboring TSOs on actually developing the infrastructure by 2030 around the Baltic Sea and also in Finland to allow for the hydrogen market development and connecting this supply and demand. But maybe I give the floor to the other speakers so that I don't take too much of everybody's time.
Thank you very much, Sara. Yeah, maybe Giulia, if you would like to add on with the Italian perspective and the Snam perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, I won't take too much time because Xavier already sort of set out the vision that we have a reconversion of the existing pipeline towards the delivery of Corridor A of the European hydrogen backbone. But this is this whole vision is going to leverage in a transitional phase on the concept of blending and virtual blending, which I'm happy to expand on in the sort of next round of discussion on regulatory enablers for the delivery of the hydrogen backbone. So in relation to the projects, so we have been involved first of all in a range of activities in relation to asset readiness to reach up to a blending percentage of up to 10%. Whereas in relation to the infrastructure projects, I would quote probably the 2 projects we have submitted for PCI application. One is the backbone that Xavier was describing before. So again, it's 2,330 kilometers of hydrogen pipelines. 73% of it is going to be based on reconverted existing pipelines. And this infrastructure project will allow 450 gigawatts per day of hydrogen to be imported from Sicily, and 219 gigawatt per day from Austria, and 135 gigawatt per day from Switzerland. As part of the project, a compressor station of up to 500 megawatts will be built. So this is well, one of the main initiatives that infrastructure initiatives that were taken forward in relation to hydrogen development. The other project I wanted to raise is the large IHN, which we're developing together with industrial chemical partners, S.p.A, Chimica, Semini, and the project that aims to create a strategic ammonia and green hydrogen hub in Sardinia through the transformation of the existing infrastructure that we've laid out. So yeah, I'll leave the floor to other participants. I'm happy to entertain the discussion about regulatory and policy enabler thereafter.
Thank you very much, Giulia. We already hear from the input so far, the cross-country dimension of the transmission projects. Looking now towards Germany and the representatives from the German TSOs, how does it look like especially in Eastern Germany, where ONTRAS is operating the grid? Stefan.
Yeah, okay. It's very easy because we are planning a regional network, nearly 950 kilometers. And the layout is basically so that we can connect to other countries, especially, for example, Poland. Yeah, we have a very close distance to Poland. And so we talk to the colleagues in Poland about further cooperation in that manner. And we are sure that not the first years, but our system cannot operate without a connection to other countries, because large parts of the demand of hydrogen are not produced in Germany. It's our estimation is that it's impossible. The first years, maybe yes, we have some projects, but in a long term, we need to import hydrogen from other countries, and so. Our plan is that we proceed in the following manner. We think in a European way, in a pan-European way, but we act in the first years very regional to start with a hydrogen network in our region and then connect it to other countries.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Ermal, would you like to add with a perspective from OGE?
Yes, and of course, the speakers have already mentioned the important dimension of the European hydrogen infrastructure. And of course, without such an infrastructure, without such a backbone, there will be no hydrogen market in Europe that can evolve. And of course, we at OGE, we are working on concrete projects to create such a hydrogen backbones that connects basically the North Sea to the inner regions in the southwest of Germany. And such a large-scale project is named Hercules. Of course, the name tells it already. It's a Herculean task, a very challenging task, but we're going to push this forward with strong partners like RWE. And this Hercules project will contribute to decarbonizing basically, and also diversify the energy supply in Germany. Of course, when we think of this wide infrastructure project, we also have to bear in mind that it leads to the development of European hydrogen market via interconnection points. So that's why pipeline, for instance, from Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, southern part of Europe play a very important role in order to enable this hydrogen backbone that overspans Europe. How we are going to proceed, basically, this is, if we think from an OGE perspective, we try to push and to close this gap between the Northern Sea coast, also that goes down to the Ruhr region by 2028. So this is a three-step process by 2028, we already expect hydrogen to flow from the north towards the south. In total, we aim to establish a 5-corridor infrastructure connecting other European countries. Hercules basically tries to create an infrastructure of 1,500 kilometers, of which 2/3 will be repurposed. Of course, we have already the methane infrastructure in place. The newly built infrastructure is also necessary in order to connect the industry, the heavy industry in the region. But when we ask the question, what is the demand? German TSOs have conducted a market survey on the demand of hydrogen, and against this background of the Hercules project, we could reach along this line a German demand that have a total hydrogen necessity of approximately 90 terawatts by 2030. If we think of 10 years later, 2040, it will be 178. So I would say the good news is also that major players in, for instance, the steel industry, heavy steel industry, such as ThyssenKrupp, have also shown and signaled their interest to be connected to this pipeline network, which is very important in order to ensure the creation of a hydrogen market and to foster the value chain.
Thank you very much, Ermal. And then also turning towards to Bornag to bring in the perspective of a large European association. What do you hear from your members in this respect? How do your members contribute to the development of the European hydrogen transport system?
Yeah, thanks, Tobias. Maybe a slightly different angle than we've heard so far. I speak more for the DSOs, and of course, you know, many of you will probably be familiar with the Ready for H2 project. That's a coalition of 90 DSOs that look at the full decarbonisation of that network and actually how the role that it can serve in terms of scaling the hydrogen economy as a foundation, of course, to the hydrogen backbone. So these DSOs, there's more than 1.4 thousand of them across Europe. They have a great connection to homes and businesses, as you know. And if we think about the REPowerEU targets and the ambition that's needed there, actually, DSOs are placed just where there can be decentralized domestic renewable energy production and connect that with hydrogen to the customers and build confidence to begin with in the customer base. And also, of course, as part of that, provide a route to market for the producers. So I mentioned Ready for H2, there's plenty of commitment there towards those goals. That's maybe not so new. I assume plenty of you already heard about that project. Perhaps what's more interesting is the work that we're doing in Eurogas right now. Just initiated in the last couple of months. We've launched a new task force specifically on skills and what we're looking at, and it goes beyond DSOs. It's relevant for everybody. The role in terms of the skill sets in Europe to inject gases, to handle gases, even the customer facing or digitalization role that's involved there. And a lot of our member companies are really invested now at the minute, as I'm sure plenty of people on the line are, in the skills needs for the energy transition, and to make sure that Europe is ready to fill the skills gap and meet the ambition of REPowerEU. Maybe more broadly as well, as a trade association, it's worth noting, of course, the role that we have, like GIE, on the legislative landscape that's keeping us all very busy these past few years. And rightly so, because there's plenty of work to be done in terms of having the right policy framework. We've been calling for targets for renewable gas for some time. And we have to keep pushing to make sure that this is really cemented properly in legislation and any number of other things. So we're busy on a number of fronts. And plenty to do. So
Thank you very much, Bonak, and you already mentioned the regulatory framework that we will come back to in a few moments. Before maybe to conclude this first part of our discussion, I would like to come back to you, Luis, by asking you how will the global hydrogen trade look in the future in terms of spatial distribution and carriers, and what does that mean for the infrastructure development that we just discussed and heard from the different operators?
Yes, thank you. So I will try to be brief because let's say we looked at hydrogen trade from a global perspective, but of course the focus of today's discussion is a bit is more on Europe. Let's say if we look at the broader picture globally, we see a lot of hopes from multiple countries, either on the importing side or on the exporting side, for hydrogen to become let's say a big part of this international energy trade. We looked at each of the G20 countries and some other specific nodes that were interesting in terms of the supply potential and the cost potential. And we ran an optimization model. And the numbers, by the way, this is all published for free. There's a trilogy of reports looking at this in detail. And the results, let's say at the high level, show that most of the hydrogen would actually be produced domestically, regionally, and only a quarter of hydrogen would actually trade borders. The reason for that, there's multiple reasons, but it's mostly about efficiency of the transport processes. Half of that trade would actually happen through pipelines and concentrated to a great extent in Europe. And that's, from our perspective, because there's a substantial infrastructure that could be potentially repurposed for the use of hydrogen and therefore make it cost effective to do trade. And we see the trade flows, not surprisingly for most of you, from south to north, from the Iberian Peninsula, Italy to the north, and also from North Africa. And that's because, in our estimation, the hydrogen production with solar PV will, for the next decades, outcompete the production with offshore wind from the north. So that we see these trade flows with pipelines from south to north. Also, let's say more generally about the trade potential. We think that globally, the trade of commodities produced with hydrogen rather than hydrogen may be more relevant. So, for instance, trade of direct reduced iron from locations where you have very cheap hydrogen, and also you have the iron ore resource, or the same for ammonia, trade of ammonia rather than trade of hydrogen. That's a bit the perspective on trade and the implications for Europe.
Thank you very much, Luis, for this perspective. And moving on now, and considering that in order to develop a hydrogen market, we need to discuss what is needed to make these ambitions become reality. And here, I think two aspects, besides further ones, of course, will be crucial, and that were already mentioned. First, the skills for the energy transition, especially when we talk about the workforce, and secondly, the regulatory framework for hydrogen transport. And starting with the first one, I am turning to Bonak again. As you mentioned, you guys recently launched a project with trade unions on skills that are needed for the energy transition, which was accompanied by a report. Could you maybe explain to us a bit in more detail what the main outcome is, what skills are specifically needed in the energy transition, and how does the energy transition change the job market from your perspective?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happily. Thank you. I'm not sure I can be so precise, but I'll tell you what we've discovered. Now, a bit of background, of course. Whenever we think about emissions reductions coming on from the Paris Agreement, a just transition, it was also the ambition of. It was part of the ambition of the Paris Agreement, and it's something that we never lose sight of. For a number of years, Eurogas has been involved, as I said, as the employer's representative in the social sectoral dialogue for gas. And 2 years ago, around the time that I started at Eurogas, we became the coordinator of an EU-funded project. And while we were the coordinator, the report as an outcome was independent. So it was a challenging but very interesting project, because we had a steering committee of 6 employers representatives and 6 trade union representatives as a drop my pen, as a kind of advisory body for the independent consultants. They found in the end that hydrogen, biomethane, CCUS, also digitalization are really crucial parts of the energy transition. To cut a long story short, a skills gap has been identified in terms of making this a reality, the decarbonized energy networks. So they have, you can guess already, you don't need me to tell you where jobs are likely to be lost. Coal and oil phase out as a primary sort of driver for that. But at the same time, a lot of strong projection of new job opportunities in the sector. So related to digitalization and related in particular to hydrogen, biomethane, carbon capture storage, and digitalization. The one thing that maybe it's not very surprising, but because of the very fast changing legislative and commercial landscape that we're in right now, mapping the skills needs exactly, so region by region, if you really want to go for a just transition, it's not that straightforward. And because of that, a key recommendation is continued very good quality social dialogue. So if you want to change the network, then you have to be in close contact regularly with the people that are working directly on it. Otherwise, it's not going to work if you don't have that link between strategic decision making and the people on the shop floor, as our trade union colleagues would put it. So plenty of other recommendations. It's about that level of communication, but also communication with national education bodies, and efforts at the EU level as well, which I'd happily come back to you in a bit if I'm not taking too much time. So we have a need for training. We have a need for quality social dialogue. And in terms of that skills gap, attracting new talent into the sector is something that was identified as being very important. And this implies a cultural change, actually. So this report, and it's not often I've seen this, I'm not sure I've seen this at all in Brussels, but it brought in the theme of intersectionality into the report. So how do we address gender inclusion? Well, we can't do it in isolation. We have to look as well at other factors of discrimination. So super interesting report. I could very happily talk about it all day, but I won't. I'm going to wrap just with the point that we are exploring an EU framework agreement. So to give this really structure around the efforts, and it would include cross-sectoral actually communication as well. So maybe I stop there, Tobias.
Thank you very much, Bjornak, and I would like to continue giving the floor to the TSOs. And what does it mean for you actually as a TSO, and when talking about the skills that are required when you move from the national gas transport to the hydrogen transport? Can you add on to Bjornak's points here by giving examples from your own companies? I saw that you, Sara, were nodding from time to time when Bjornak was speaking.
Yeah. Okay. So if I continue, but I have to comment on Lewis's point on the flows or potential flows of hydrogen and how the trade probably looks like in Europe. Sorry, I'm going back to that topic for 1 second. Just wanted to sort of highlight the potential also from regions that maybe have gone a little bit under the radar, and bringing together also that how do we want to fuel our societies in the future, and the regional perspective to that. And that is a theme that comes up also in the European Hydrogen Backbone Group a lot, that there probably are other regions that have a little bit woken up to the hydrogen development a little bit later than others, and see, for example, in the Nordics, potential for onshore wind. And just to have to say that from my background picture, there's a lot of space. in our country. We are the same size as Germany, but only 5 million people, a bit more. So just to give you an idea that there are probably a lot of untapped potential also within Europe. And that also then the cross-border collaboration is a very important topic. But then coming back to this, the actual question that we were supposed to talk, or I was supposed to talk about in this context, is that we are currently in a major change from the society's point of view, and from, of course, our TSO perspective, and developing a new business and a new infrastructure and new value chains. And this requires change in our thinking. It requires a lot of collaboration, and nobody can sort of achieve the targets alone. And then we have to come together in order to achieve the results that we want to achieve. So basically being more independent from the energy side, as well as achieving the climate neutrality targets. And here, of course, the land use and permitting are key things to highlight, and clarity on regulation in different sort of sectors, not just the transmission side of gases, but the overall value chain, and developing innovative ways for the market development and funding the new infrastructure, when from day one they won't be filled with hydrogen, and the market will grow gradually. So how do we develop an energy infrastructure in the future energy system that will be efficient also in the future, basically? This is my point, and a lot of new skills needed on that side as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Have you and Giulia made similar experiences within Snam, or what is your input?
Yes, so yeah, it all quite resonates to me. So in terms of what we're doing at Snam, so I would say we're doing work around 4 areas. First one is conducting a skill assessment. So we're engaging with our HR in an active program to map where is there gaps in our knowledge, and we're focusing a lot on sector coupling, so enhancing also our knowledge on the electricity markets, given that in the future the electricity and gas markets and hydrogen markets are going to be more and more integrating. We're collaborating with universities in Italy, also pushing together with the Polytechnic University of Milan, a master program in energy management, covering renewable energy, energy efficiency, and digitalization. We've invested in the digital technologies, so we have implemented a digital platform that gives us advanced analytic and machine learning to optimize gas flows and reduce energy consumption, and also have upskilled its workforce that is functional to the operation of this new digital platform. And more broadly, we are fostering a culture of continuous learning. So we have an internal corporate university, where we are making sure that we spread knowledge as relevant. So that's from my point of view.
Thank you, Giulia. And finally, Stefan, do you also have some similar experiences from ONTRAS?
Yeah, they are very similar to what the colleagues said. First, ONTRAS has we have some very clear ideas on how to transit our company to hydrogen. First, ONTRAS has a special training program for their staff and for all employees in the field of hydrogen, to enable or to ensure that everyone can match the further requirements. And there are some internal and self-organized, let me say, work groups dare discuss hydrogen topics internal and very self-organized. So a lot of colleagues are knowing what to do next. Secondly, in the last year, we have hired some additional staff and in various departments, beginning from, let me say, technicians over engineers and also marketing experts, to fulfill our first task for the H2 StartNet. But we know that today we need more staff in the next years. And so we have some tight relations to universities and also to, let me say, educational centers for recruiting, because we know there will be a lack of staff in the next, let me say, 5 to 10 years. And the third point is we are aware that the know-how not only depends on what we know about hydrogen, it also depends on what our, let me say, construction companies and service companies know about hydrogen. And so we have some special, let me say, programs to cooperate with such companies and to help them to educate their staff and their employees for the field of hydrogen. Summa summarum, we are in a transition process, and we have to change our mindset, not only to know what hydrogen is, but also to how to deal with new methods and how to be very fast to introduce hydrogen in our network. Yeah, that's from our side.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And I think it was a very interesting discussion to hear about the skills that are needed for the energy transition. I have the feeling it is something that deserves much more attention in the public discussion that we are currently having. A second aspect, which is also currently debated and discussed, is the regulatory environment. We see the ongoing discussions very intensively at European level. And here I would like to ask all of you, what are the key considerations for policymakers and energy system planners with regards to the development of hydrogen infrastructure in Europe? Maybe I would like to start with you, Luis, to answer this question first.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. Just one comment. Going back to the question that Sara mentioned, or that was mentioned before on the flows south to north. Indeed, just to clarify, what we see in that modeling analysis of this, the net flows are higher from south to north than north to south. That doesn't mean that there's no production from north to south, and indeed, so that's an optimization model. That doesn't mean that in reality investment decisions are based purely on an optimization model. There's obviously a broader perspective on risk on this, for instance, policy risk on the supplier side, etc., that should be taken into account. And also, I agree. Indeed, there's a lot of untapped potential for renewables to produce additional quantities of hydrogen. And I would even, but maybe this is for another debate, I would even question the idea that Europe needs to be a net importer. So potentially, I think the potential, but that's a great maybe discussion for other panel. So coming back to the priorities for energy system planners, I think one key element that from IRENA we would like to bring here to the discussion is starting the planning process from the end use of hydrogen. So hydrogen, yes, we will need hydrogen to close the loop of a net zero energy system, but hydrogen for what exactly? It is important to consider what is the application in planning infrastructure, because hydrogen is not a one-to-one substitute of natural gas. And in fact, for many applications for which we use natural gas today, hydrogen is a high cost, highly inefficient option to substitute that gas. So we think we should not plan just by analogy with what natural gas was, but start the discussion from what is the service that we want to produce? What is the application that we want to decarbonize? So for instance, are we talking about heating buildings? Are we talking about heating industry? Are we talking about aviation? Are we talking about industrial commodities? And each of those has a different answer. So when we look at planning like this, then there's big differences in the value proposition for hydrogen for each of these applications. If on the one hand, we look at heating or road transport, we think that there's few chances that hydrogen can in the long term become competitive with direct electrification. And we don't think it's a matter of innovation, it's a matter of physics constraints. No? So we think if we go that route and we plan infrastructure with that route, trying to have a pervasive network that looks at all of these applications, then there's a high risk of stranded assets. If we, on the other hand, we take a more focused approach on applications like fertilizer production or primary steel production or certain port infrastructure where you have the potential to produce synthetic fuels, or some network hubs where you will have the potential to provide flexibility to the grid, then you have a long-term valuable proposition for decades to come, even in a fully decarbonized energy system. So I think this is a key point from our side. I think we should definitely develop the infrastructure, but with a careful, razor-sharp approach, focusing on those corridors and those geographical locations where you have a long-term guarantee of green hydrogen demand, so that you have with this green hydrogen the highest decarbonization value possible, and also that we use the public money in the wisest ways possible. So this is, say, the key point that we would like to bring in terms of planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. Ermal, what is your view on this, and maybe also link to the question: which elements are most important, in your opinion, in the current discussion around the regulatory framework for hydrogen transport, and what your key asks here are?
Yes, thank you, Tobias. That's indeed a very important questions that have also kept the entire value chain busy of thinking how to most efficiently create a framework to work in, to be able to ramp up the hydrogen economy in Europe. And of course, in Europe, we need a regulation that in which we have certainty. So we need certainty to invest in the infrastructure to be able to build EHB and European hydrogen backbone. But that's not always the case. And sometimes we have the impression that such a regulatory framework is too stringent, too focusing on not on entirely local dimensions. Such stringent rules might, from our perspective, very much hinder the ramp up of an hydrogen economy, but also of an infrastructure that goes hand in hand. We have to bear in mind that the hydrogen market in Europe is still in its infancy. So it's a very young market. So we have to be very, when we think of regulating it too much. Sara has also mentioned on the point of clarity. Yes, we need, of course, in terms of regulatory thinking, clarity on how the rules are. And we need speed in this case, speed meaning that we need to be able to have the certainty to build the infrastructure. We can't wait 3 years, 2 years if we think of permitting. So it leads to my question also, how important permitting is. Of course, we need also rules that fast and accelerate permitting procedures. When we think of different infrastructural projects, it takes 7 to 8 years, depending on the country, but this is an average time frame that we have to think of, and thinking in the future of 2030. So it's only about 7 years ahead if we want to reach the REPowerEU targets. So basically, my take would be to be more pragmatic, to see that we can deliver, to be more pragmatic than perfectionist. So sometimes in Germany we tend to be very perfectionist, but it is also wise to be very pragmatic in order to achieve a common goal.
Thank you very much, Ermal. Being conscious of the time, we can maybe slowly wrap up this session, but I would still like to give the other 4 panelists a quick chance to give their comments on the regulatory framework for hydrogen before concluding this panel. Giulia, if you would like to go first, maybe.
Sure. So I'll try to be quick. So I think to secure investment certainty, I think targets are very important. So embedding the targets of the REPowerEU into the ongoing discussion on the gas package, including the dimension on imports, is something that would give a strong signal to investors. The other one is infrastructure planning and financiability. There is a discussion in Europe about who's going to have the responsibility for the European infrastructure planning. And we believe it should be a sort of institution that puts together gas and hydrogen operators in order to have a smooth delivery of the European hydrogen backbone, which is 70% made of existing pipelines. And the third one, last one, is on blending. Again, blending may play a big role in some certain member states. So what it is important that in the European legislation currently, under definition, there is no obstacle, there's no constraint to the ability of member states to use blending as a policy enabler for hydrogen development. Thank you.
Thank you, Giulia. Stefan, your key asks.
Go on further with the task because we don't have time, and I can't add anything new, and so I'm quiet.
Okay. If Sara or Bjornak, if you have any final asks or remarks relation to the regulatory discussion.
If I start, maybe just to highlight to the overall infrastructure development discussion that when we looked into the Nordic Hydrogen Route project, which we kicked off last year and are currently in the first development phase, we looked at the potential, what can this infrastructure enable, is of course the connecting supply and demand and creating the market based on these renewables. And in that project, we aim to actually develop together with Nordion Energy on the Swedish side, 1,000 kilometers of completely new hydrogen pipeline around the Botnia Bay region in the northern part of Finland and Sweden. And why I'm bringing up this example is that when we looked at the potential of this region is that we were estimating that investing to the infrastructure side, hydrogen pipeline side, and there we had the estimate of 3.5 billion euro for this 1,000 kilometer of hydrogen pipeline, very rough estimate, initial estimate. But the point is that it enables over tenfold of investments to the renewables and hydrogen production, and then further investments to the derivatives and refining of hydrogen to the higher value products. And this is the key point that I would like to raise, that in order to achieve this change and in order for the other value chain players to actually make their investment decision, the infrastructure needs to be there and can support this transition. And the urgency of achieving and making sure that the investments on the infrastructure side come is of course of very high importance. And I would like to also raise the point that, of course, the TSOs are in contact with the market players and sort of trying to understand all the time that is there a need for this type of infrastructure. So at least that's a few points from my side.
Thank you, Sara. Then my final question would be Bjornak, if you would like to add something, last but not least.
Thank you. I guess it's all about balance, because obviously we have to work very fast and in a very smart way on decarbonisation. And at the same time, we can't close the door where there's a decarbonisation pathway. So there's a lot of variation across Europe, as we all know, region by region. And at Eurogas, we talk about systems thinking. So look at the local level or the member state level or any particular level. What are the resources there? What are the constraints there? And what's the best approach at that kind of level? So that definitely proved true in terms of skills. And from our perspective, it's true as well in terms of end uses. So balanced sort of systems approach. And I think that balance also applies to this question about investor certainty. I totally agree with this versus over-regulation. And I think that's just a reality that that we have to accept. So we need targets and we need certainty in the investor landscape, whether that's on points that we've worked with also in the unions, like unbundling. But at the same time, it is a nascent market, and we have to be kind of stretchy, or policymakers and leaders have to be stretchy and adaptive as this progresses, because we don't know what the year ahead or the next 10 years exactly holds.
So, I just lost the connection for 1 second. So, yeah. So thank you, Bonak, and thank you to all. I think we talked about the development of hydrogen transport projects, the relevant skills that are needed to make them become reality, and also looked at the regulatory framework for hydrogen transport. I think we could continue discussing for much time, and there would be so much more to discuss. I also see that there were some questions raised from the audience, but being conscious of the time, I would like to thank all of you for the very good panel discussion and your very interesting and valuable insights. And then I would like to give the floor back to Holnum, and thank you all for your attention.
Thanks again, Tobias, Sara, Giulia, Louise, Bruno, Stefan, Ermo, and a very special thank you for Tobias for organizing and moderating such an informative and valuable panel discussion. I really look forward to meeting you all as a Connecting Green Hydrogen Europe in Madrid this July. Right now, it comes to an end of today's Impact webinar. Thank you all for joining us today to explore the exciting and rapidly evolving world of hydrogen pipeline in Europe. It has been such a pleasure to host this webinar and hear from our expert speakers on the promising potential of a pipeline infrastructure for a stable and efficient hydrogen future. I hope you have found this discussion informative and thought-provoking, and leave you with a greater understanding of opportunity and challenges facing this industry. Let's continue to work together to advance the development of hydrogen pipeline and build a brighter, cleaner future for Europe and beyond. Once again, please remember, today's Impact webinar is a virtual part of Europe's largest and most influential green hydrogen conference and expo, Connecting Green Hydrogen Europe 2023, which will take place on July 5th to July 6th in Madrid, Spain. Please don't hesitate to secure your tickets and join this must-to-attend event, together with C-level decision makers from Galp, E.ON, Repsol, EDPR, Energas, Shell, Engie, BP, Intercontinental Energy, and much more to expect. Thank you guys for staying with us for the past 2 hours, and see you at the next webinar of Connecting Green Hydrogen Europe 2023. Thank you.